Gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. We're continuing on with the katana, and yesterday, and in fact the day before too, you saw me working on the guard, the tsuba, as far as I understand. That is what it's called. It might not be called. Let me know in the comments below. And on today's episode, we're going to be working on a spacer. But before we get on to that, you remember yesterday, so we could fill up some content and make yesterday's episode even better, because we repeated the same thing that we did the day before. We made a kiradashi out of the same wrought iron that we used for the guard, and out of one of the same billets of Damascus that made up the stars and the special pattern that's running down the middle of the sword. We're going to go into the grinding room and we're going to start grinding on that kiradashi. Thanks for joining me. Dokely. So the kiradashi has been a rough ground, and of course, if you're unfamiliar as to why it is I'm making a kiradashi while I'm making a katana, it's because yesterday we needed to make content, and a kiradashi is going to be useful in some of the next major steps of the katana process. We need to heat treat this bad boy. We can do it with the torch. This is how it's looking right now. It's at 120 grit all over. There is a slight issue. There's a little bit of delamination right here, which is a great shame. That's just where the wrought iron did not weld in nicely with the Damascus. We're still going to go ahead and finish this thing real fast. Now, first things first, I'm going to do a normalizing cycle. So I'm going to heat this up to the critical temperature and hopefully not explode the workshop. Let it cool down in still air. Okay, so now we've done a total of 3 normalizing cycles. We're slowly bringing this up to temperature for our final quench. And we're going to do something interesting with our quench and our temper. You've seen me do it before. Okay, we're up to temperature. Into the oil we go. But I'm not going to cool off the whole piece. I actually want a little extra heat in there, because that's going to be how we temper it. So, the way we temper it, you see me do this before, done it a lot on hand tools, is I'm going to scratch the edge here with a grinding disc. And then what I can do is, if I reflect it in the light, I'm going to see the temper colors. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a dark blue back here and a light straw along the edge. And so just make sure that, okay, I need to cool off this heel right there. It's got the heat back in it a little faster. And as we come up to the toe of the piece, so you've got a nice straw there. The straw is slowly coming up to the toe. It got too hot at the heel. Cool off the heel some more. And then we'll repeat the process. Working with new scratch lines, we'll do a second temper cycle. Okay, and there we go. Got straw at the tip. I'll cool off the whole thing, give it a wipe, and then now in regards to what we're going to do on the sepper, which is a copper spacer, I'm not entirely sure. I want to wait until I've started working on the actual handle itself. So, I've taken this piece of copper, put some blue Daikon on it, scribed some lines, and made a center punch mark where I need a 5mm hole. All I'm going to do here is make sure that I got a good fit up with the tang, and then the final shaping can be done when the handle is there, so we can kind of see where we want this. A little bit of heat should be all it takes to break the bond of the super glue. There we go. And I'll just take the opportunity to anneal it.
So
So the copper spacer fits up there rather nicely, and of course now, time to continue working on this little kiridashi so we can make the handle. Oakley dokley, so we've got it polished. I'm going to give it a little bit of a degrease there. I'm going to make sure I don't touch it with my hands anymore. Wipe it down. And so obviously this is wrought iron and Damascus steel. And over the last few episodes, you've heard me talk just a little bit about some of the interesting features of wrought iron. So one of these fabulous features, of course, is the grain-like texture that it has, similar to Damascus steel, not so contrasty than the steels that we use for our Damascus, but it's going to look a little like a wood grain, or at least I hope it does, otherwise this preamble would have been useless. But because we have a Damascus edge, there's going to be Damascus on the edge, wrought iron on the tang of the kiridashi. Should we have a look? It's going to take some time for the wrought iron to etch, enough that we can see it. We're going to do a very nice heavy etch, but here you can get a little bit of an idea of the almost wood grain-like texture that wrought iron has, teamed with the Damascus on the edge. This is a special piece. We're going to leave it in there for about half an hour to an hour. I need to extend my sincere gratitude to Island Blacksmith. I'm going to link his stuff down below because he reached out to me. He specializes in making tantos. I believe the Samurai Carpenter made a video with him. He reached out and gave me some unbelievable resources to look at that he's got on his website regarding traditional Japanese constructions, and holy moly macaroni, it has been so insightful to learn and get a little bit of an inkling as to how it is that he makes the handles, because the next step is going to be making the handle. Now, our tang, it's very difficult to make YouTube videos with pens that don't work. Our tang obviously is very long, and in ways that I've made handles before is I'll use a milling cutter and a drill bit and a file and chisels and work it out of a piece, but that's for a handle that's like 4 or 5 inches long. This tang here, it's enormous. How do we get a hole in there? Well, the Japanese way of doing it, as far as I understand, thank you Island Blacksmith, is we take a block of wood that is the block of wood that needs a hole in it to be shaped for the handle. We cut down the center of the wood. We plane the two faces so they're perfectly flat and will sit back together. We open up the two pieces and we carve out the shape of the tang in both halves. The two pieces get glued back together, the handle gets shaped, and it fits perfectly to the tang. This is the same way they make the scabbard of a katana. Insert Japanese word for that. It's just obviously that's on a much larger scale, so there's going to be a lot of chiseling required for this, and of course that is why we're making the kiridashi, because we need a kiridashi for it, despite the fact that I've already got a kiridashi, but I needed YouTube content, really. Okay. So I left the kiridashi in the acid for 14 hours. Or so, if not a little bit longer. The wrought iron etched away like you wouldn't believe, and it looked pretty terrible. I did not know whether I was going to be able to salvage this. I went to the grinder, I took some 240 grit, I worked on the edges, I went to my buffing wheels, and I worked a little bit on that, smoothed it off to see if I couldn't, if I could get it to the point where I wouldn't cut myself. I sharpened it again. You gotta check this out. I cannot believe how awesome that looks. Goodness, I am just so lucky that it is still in one piece, and I actually managed to get something that can be held and isn't going to cut you from bits of wrought iron that is sticking out. So I'm actually very pleased. Terrible mistake. Don't leave stuff in acid for 14 hours unless you want it to look like it's been underwater for 200 years. But it is indeed time to move on to the next step. And now it is time for the handle. I've got a selection of woods here. I've got oak, I've got rosewood, olive wood, or ebony. The problem with ebony is it's a very brittle wood, so I don't think it's going to work too well for this handle construction. It would probably, however, be lovely to carve, because we've got a lot of carving coming up. It's a tough one. This is the stingray leather that I have, and one little issue with this is it's a little bit small indeed, so I can't wrap it all the way around. However, I was watching a Japanese sword documentary that somebody kindly sent me a link to, and I saw them inset it into the handle. I tell you what, stingray leather is an extremely interesting material. Firstly, the hide itself looks just like you'd expect. It even has eye holes. What's very interesting is the texture of this. It's almost like it's a little beads. It's a fascinating material. And even with all those fancy woods that we've got down there, here is a piece of oak, and I dare say I'm tempted to use a very, very simple material. Use the oak for this handle. It means I've got plenty to work with, and so I'll easily have enough. Obviously, this is a massive board, but I can really make sure that I definitely have enough. Having said that, I'd have enough in the ebony if I decided to use that. And yep, I'd have more than enough in the other woods if I decided to use those. So why is it that my mind goes towards using oak? I don't quite know, but it does. Okay, so we are here at my father's woodwork shop, which is very exciting. I grew up in here learning how to use a draw knife and such forth, and so it's good to do a little bit of work here because he's got tools that I don't have. Better to do with some woodwork in the woodwork shop. Here is our piece of oak. And we need to start working on it. My plan's as follows. I'm going to cut off a piece that's going to work for the handle. We're then going to slice it down the middle. We're going to plane it flat so it meets back together perfectly. And then is the long and arduous task of carving out the perfect tang hole, half in one side, half in the other. This is going to be an ordeal. We have our two pieces pretty flat. Very difficult trying to use a plane and get stuff flat. We also have another two pieces. This is the first two pieces we started with that I had to put to the side because, like I said, planing things is difficult. But what I now need to do is I need to use the kiradashi, our marking knife, indeed, to lay out where it is that we cut out our material for the tang. Ogly doggly. So now, I've got a lot of carving to do. Gee whiz, I certainly have my work cut out for me for the rest of the day. But for this episode, that's going to be it. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can see how this goes. Woodworking is not a real skill of mine, so it's going to be fun trying to learn and work my way through it. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you drop a like below. Leave us a comment. We'll see you tomorrow as we continue working on